When I was 5, I got a parakeet for Christmas. My big sister named him Couscous. And I taught him to say, "Hello, Polly," which wasn't either of our names. But hey, I was 5. Couscous was my best friend and I told him everything. Though, granted, there's not a huge deal for a 5-year-old to tell a bird. I would dream about him saying, "Hello, Polly," every second night. And though he got out and flew away after a few months, the dream still lingered for a long time. A few years later, my big sister got a kitty and I insisted she be called Quinoa. Mom and Dad told me no one would know how to pronounce that, so we settled on Idli instead. I hate Idli, so of course I didn't like the name one bit. But Mom reminded me that she was my sister's cat, not mine, and I had no right to throw a tantrum, despite the fact that my sister had named Couscous. Couscous. When I was 10, I read The Horse Whisperer and fell in love with the romantic notion of talking to animals. I would sit with Idli for an hour at a time, telepathically telling her all about my friends at primary school while she meowed incessantly. Dad said, "If you're going to stare at the damn cat, you can feed the damn cat." New neighbors moved in the year 2000 and brought 2 dogs with them, a yapper and a barker. I developed an appreciation for the law this year because Dad said he'd cave both their heads in with a shovel, if it wasn't illegal. It was then that I discovered I was an animal whisperer. I could hear what they were, for lack of a better word, thinking from within about 50 meters. When they weren't making an actual racket, Rex and Zipper would fill my head. I'd hear a whoop whoop and a eep eep every morning just as the neighbors were getting ready for work and they were excited to be getting another day's breakfast. I complained about the noise and Mom said I had the hearing of a hawk. I'm not quite sure where Mom gets her metaphors from. When a 12-year-old discovers that they have psychic powers, they don't want to tell their family, but they want to tell someone. I told a friend who demanded proof, so I headed around after soccer practice to speak to the family angelfish. I stared at it. It stared back with its beady little eyes and fishy mouth. "Nothing," I said. "I don't think it has a brain. But I can hear a duck outside." My friend asked, "What's it saying?" "I don't know. It doesn't speak English. I'm not quite sure what means." Naturally, they didn't believe me. Why would they? Why would anyone believe someone who claims to hear animal sounds in their head? And how could I ever prove a chicken once told me? That year, I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. Once I made a connection with any animal, its voice would fill my head whenever I was near it. My walk to school was beginning to sound like feeding time at the zoo. Dozens of birds, cats, and other animals were chattering away in my head. An MP3 player on full blast was about the only thing that helped, but even that only helped so much. Imagine walking to school listening to this. I walk a lonely road, the only whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't know where it goes, but it's I was around 15 when I proved it and got in the local paper. A puppy had gotten itself lost and I heard it from a drain. No one really believed me, but the family had already wasted money on an animal psychic and were desperate enough to bother the fire brigade with the rantings of an insane adolescent, as my father was kind enough to put it. I became a local living legend after that, and my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Wilkshire Smith, offered me $50 to find out why her beloved Tabby wasn't coming in at night. I sat down next to Tabby and petted her. She said, "Meow, meow," which made very little sense to someone who isn't a cat, but I translated it for Mrs. Wilkshire Smith as, "She stays inside all day because she's scared of the neighborhood children. You should buy them all video games so they spend more time indoors." So she went out and bought us all copies of Assassin's Creed, and it actually worked. After that, people started throwing money at me, left, right, and center to fix their animals' problems. Birds with digestive issues, a ferret with a lopsided gait, fussy cats who only ate dog food. Every odd animal problem you can imagine. You know, these rings are supposed to control my temper, but I don't think that's happened. Then one day, a pro jockey offered me $400 to find out why his horse had been so uncooperative over the last few months. I locked eyes with Princess Anne Frank. She stared at me with these deep, brown, enormous, evil eyes. As she stared at me, she said, I didn't like Princess Anne Frank one bit. Send her to the glue factory, I said, without breaking eye contact. This one's racing days are over. The jockey stared into my eyes, grimaced, turned to his horse, gave it a big pat on the flanks, and disappeared into the stables. His manager paid my mum, and that was that. It'll haunt me till the day I die that they actually did it. I was 15 and I didn't know there'd be consequences for condemning a horse that looked at me funny. It must have built the guilt they could sense in me, or some weird sixth sense thing, but all of a sudden, animals hated me. Birds would swoop down at me wherever I went, screeching as I hurried by. My life was a non-stop symphony of barking dogs. Cats yowled and scratched me, and I always had ants crawling up my socks and biting my ankles. I tried to play the horse whisperer, and now my head was filled with screams. Screams of rage and loathing aimed at a kid they wanted to see dead. It was hell. I didn't sleep for a month. I tried to put it together, but I couldn't get along with anyone anymore, and Mum ended up taking me out of school. She took me to the doctors, the ones near the vet. Animals' voices were filling my head. Roosters. Pigs. Cuckoos. Hyenas. It was intolerable. I got piles and medical records off the shelves, screaming and covering my eyes to drown out the noises. These animals were going to kill me for what I did to Princess Anne Frank. I murdered her. And they were going to get me. They were going to avenge her death. I had to get out of there. I had to get the hell out of there as fast as my legs could carry me. I screamed at the top of my lungs and ran full bolt for the door. They didn't institutionalize me, but I came to my senses in a hospital after I'd blacked out. The doctor had read about me in the papers and already had the neuroleptics on standby. Oh, take one every morning and you'll be better in no time flat. I started taking the meds and I don't hear animal sounds in my head anymore. And they sent me home after a week. I was in school after a fortnight. You know, I don't believe I'm the schizophrenic they're treating me as. The drugs affect certain neural pathways, and it's only natural that they shut out the whispering. If my gift wasn't real, how would I find the puppy in the drain? And explain why I got 20 times the national bee sting average last June. Either way, I'm happy enough there's nothing going on in my head anymore. I have my human thoughts to worry about. One second. Hello? It's Gary.